Welcome, everyone. My name is Susan Patterson, and I'm the host of this YouTube channel, Winning the Fight Against Human Trafficking and Child Exploitation. Today, we have the privilege of hearing from Alfred Lomas, a former gang leader who is now a community leader in transforming the South Central area of Los Angeles, California. Through Inner City Visions, the nonprofit that he created, Alfred has dedicated his life to breaking the cycles of poverty, addiction, and gang violence that he was once entrenched in himself. He has rescued hundreds of children out of the grip of traffickers and has given them hope for the future. He is frequently called on by the city to mediate between transnational criminal gangs and interrupt the violence between African American and Hispanic gangs. Lomas pioneered the hardcore gang intervention and collaboration model and works to maintain the ceasefire agreements between the three largest and most notorious gangs in the city. He has pioneered numerous programs like the Safe Route to School program, which provides a safe passage for children to get to school in these dangerous neighborhoods. And you can find the website link for Inner City Visions in the video description below. Alfred is an example of a man who said yes to God, despite feeling that he was not equipped to do what he felt God was calling him to do. But he trusted that God would provide him with what Alfred needed to accomplish his mission, and God has done that. His story and the work that he has done will leave you inspired and motivate you to do that which God is calling you to do. Please do support our work to equip the community to fight human trafficking by subscribing to this channel and liking and sharing this video. Let's join Alfred now. So welcome, everyone. I'm so honored today to have Alfred Lomas, who grew up in a gang community in South Central LA, became a gang member, then experienced a personal transformation, out of which he has spent the last 2 decades working with at-risk youth. So Alfred, why don't you tell us a little bit about that transformation?
Absolutely. I was actually born into a family that had a lot of challenges. And out of that, when I was about 7 years old, I began to smoke marijuana, what they call self-medicating. And that self-medicating led to alcohol abuse at an early age as well. So I ended up joining the gang at 12 years old. And my entire life was really just a living hell of trying to deal with a lot of childhood trauma. And, you know, today I can speak with a conviction on the importance of what the spiritual transformation was for me. You know, today I have a wonderful family. We have a successful nonprofit helping a lot of children out of the lifestyles that I once was a part of. So it's really important to speak to the importance of being grounded spiritually, and then being supported by a community and family members that are willing to help.
That's fabulous. That's so inspiring. So why was Inner Vision started?
It was actually started out of a need. You know, about 20 years ago, I was part of a faith-based Christian rehab program. And in that journey, I began to see and experience a wonderful world of giving back. You know, I was a director of a food program, and we had given, you know, 200 tons of food a month to the inner city and housing projects. And one thing became clear was violence. There was unprecedented violence in LA. In 1 year, about 20 people were killed in a small area. And, you know, God just birthed this vision that without freedom from violence, no other freedoms can exist. So we began to work, created a nonprofit to work in high crime communities. You know, most people run away from the high crimes. We ran into the high crime. And today we have an evaluation from public health. There was a 43% reduction in murders and violent crime at a local park that we were part of. So
Wow.
that was the start of how we began the nonprofit.
And how does the work that you do prevent human trafficking?
Well, that's a great question. And I'll tell you, the work that we do is that when people think, let me give you a little bit of the history on trafficking as we know it now today, both from people that are engaged in the work, whether it's clinical, community, education, or just lay people. You know, most people, when they think of trafficking, will always go towards the rescue. In fact, about 99% of all resources is geared towards the rescue end of
Yes.
it. So
Yes.
most people are thinking, okay, here's a rescue, a person's getting help, and it's very important, it's very noble cause, and very vital. However, what we know is that trafficking is preventable. So a lot of these young girls that are rescued when they're 16, 17, 18 years old, there's a lot of risk factors that they had when they were young girls. A similar idea of that is my life. If I was smoking marijuana at 7 years old, that's a risk factor. There's something inherently wrong and disturbing about that type of behavior. So with our young girls, we identify risk factors that propel a lot of these girls into a pipeline of trafficking. So we've had girls as young as 6 years old that we've been able to help in our prevention program and redirect a lot of these behaviors through both mental health, mentoring, prayer, and just a community engagement piece.
As we both know, the gangs are very much involved in sex trafficking. And so could you tell us a little bit about how you know they're working in your community to recruit victims and also recruiters, young boys who then, trick girls to become a victim for the pimp or human trafficker?
Right. Well, I would say that to answer that question, I would generalize the term in that we'll frame it around traffickers as a whole. And what we're seeing and what we experience, what we do know collectively as a community and a body of workers in trafficking is that there's a grooming phase. There's perpetrators that understand what these risk factors are, very similar to as I described the smoking of marijuana, running away. There's young girls that have absolutely no family members that are generally in foster care. There's a high percentage of girls that are trafficked that come out of foster care. And that really tells us that they have no support systems. It's really an important time for us to step back and say, hey, what would that look like to be a 9-year-old girl that has absolutely no support system, that's in the foster care, that's also being abused. So the numbers and studies show that a lot of these young children are being abused in either foster care or in some areas of their life. So when we take that factor, a lot of these girls are running away from that abuse, and a lot of perpetrators of and traffickers understand this dynamic. So they see these young girls in areas that they may congregate at, whether it's parks, and they know how to identify these young children, and then they begin to groom them. That's one aspect of it. There's also the social media aspect of it, the catfishing, and there's a whole different aspects to the grooming part that we could probably get a half a day training piece on that for people to become educated on it. But at the end of the day, what a lot of these perpetrators are basically doing is what we do also in our work, is that we identify these young girls in the prevention aspect of it, and then surround them with supportive services, from employment to education to just mentoring. Sometimes everyone needs someone to talk to. And that's really at the end of the day what this is about. It's humanizing this journey for these young girls that are going through horrific circumstances. And at the end of the day, it's really just reaching down and being able to help someone that could never repay you back. And that's what this is about.
Yes. And one of the things you pointed out where I think the church can really make a difference is on recruiting good, healthy foster parents to take care of these children, to really intervene in their lives. Because as we know, being in a group home or whatever, I mean, the social workers do the best they can, but it's not the same as being part of a family where someone is definitely going to be, on top of everything you're doing. Very much
Absolutely.
so. What do you think is important for our audience to know if they feel called to do something similar to what you're doing?
Well, I would say always, the first thing is to always pray. We have to be mindful of the importance of prayer, and also to be discipled. The Bible is very clear on being able to pray and be discipled with leadership in the church. I can't tell you, more times than not, we see a lot of individuals that mean to do well, but this type of challenge, helping children that are being enslaved in trafficking, is going to require much more than a lot of emotional kind of, I want to do this seasonally. And so I would say, first of all, pray, be under discipleship with the senior pastor, because the vision that God is birthing in people should be aligned in the sense that there's the leadership of a church, the church is supporting it, and then if those mechanisms are in place, then I would suggest then praying with your pastor and start seeking possibly organizations that are already doing the type of work around trafficking. The other piece is to pray for wisdom. How is this preventable? How can we stop this? I truly believe with all my heart that we can eradicate trafficking in a comprehensive approach. So be in prayer about not just status quo checking boxes type programs, but really about how can we really undergird this issue and prevent it in every aspect of it.
Very good. Now, do you do any work with the perpetrators, with the gang members to rehabilitate them?
Well, that's no, that's your question. No, we're exclusively focused on the well-being and restoration for children and adult victims. So that would be an entirely different approach to the work, but it's also very needed as well.
Yes. Yes, it's very, very needed. As you and I both know, because for every perpetrator that you turn around, you may be saving how many victims that they, wind up grooming and how many young women and girls that they turn into victims through their efforts.
Absolutely. And that would fall under what we're framing around a comprehensive place-based community effort. And I'll tell you why I say community effort and comprehensive is that obviously anyone that harms children certainly needs to be in jail. Everyone can agree to that. There's also the prevention, intervention, the education, the restoration, but also community place-based intervention. We're located in gang territory. I mean, we're not a parachute program that we come in and then we leave and go to the suburbs. We're literally in the heart of the trafficking challenges. In fact, we're so elated that a high percentage of our young victims and girls are brought to us by family members. We have caretakers, people that are, grandmothers that are overwhelmed that have come to us. And it's such a joy to be able to help these families navigate these challenges. And that's part of the prevention aspect of it. When we have families that are saying, hey, can you help our daughter? And absolutely, let's put all of our heads together and be able to do that, because it's also a family challenge. More times than not, people look at this as the individual is being rescued, but there's an entire family dynamic that goes along with this issue as well, and a cultural dynamic as well. So we're thankful that we can really, really zone in strategically and be able to speak to these challenges and then also create these efforts for children.
Yeah, and I want to underline what you said about a comprehensive approach. So, and I'm of the mindset that everyone should stay in their lane, what they're good at, go deep, become great at it, rather than trying to be all things to everyone. But the other side of it with regard to the perpetrators is, I know that I was talking to a police chief and he told me that it's often a real dilemma for these police officers because, in one case, there was this 14-year-old boy who the gang members wanted him to be a recruiter and he refused. And what they did is they took a picture of his younger sister and said, next time, what we're going to show you is us raping her if you don't do everything we tell you to do. So he went out and did that. But, in many ways, he's also a victim too. He's a victim, but now, we want to criminalize him because of what he's done. But to me, there's really a need for rehabilitation on that side also. And I know that there are organizations that are looking at and working at that. And I just want to underline again, the comprehensive approach that, like you mentioned in the beginning, we're hyper-focused on rescuing, which is awesome, but only 2% of victims are ever rescued. So if we don't prevent it, it will never end, which is why it's so critical the work that you're doing?
Well, I'll give you some examples of what we have and some positive outcomes, very similar to what you just described in terms of that kind of example that was given to you by the police chief. So in our comprehensive play space, we have we work in the local high schools. We have an MOU to provide on-campus services. We work with the PSA counselors where they flag some of the risk factors for these young girls or children that are being exploited. And then there's the reference, they reference the work to us as well. So we also work with the local parks. We work with the park directors. And what happens is, because we are community-based, and that's so important to say, the messaging about the work that we do is that we're an organic organization. 100% of our employees, with the exception, my wife's a volunteer and she's actually helped build this organization. So she's a non-paid individual in the work. But with the exception of my wife, she's from Oregon, and she has so much favor in the community, and that really speaks to the relationship building for this comprehensive approach. But with the exception of my wife, we're 100% from this community, and this comprehensive approach is really creating from within dynamic. So we're not challenged in the sense of people not knowing who we are. Everyone knows who we are, from the bad guys to the good guys to the people that are just struggling, and that's important to have. And we can replicate these type of services in high crime communities, because at the end of the day, it's a organic move. So to your point, if a child is being challenged in whatever the situation may be, if there's an organization that is vetted by the community, right, that is accepted by the community, and that is doing great work for the community, then it will be honored by the community. So you take that circumstances you just described, and that individual would more than likely have come to our office and said, hey, look, I'm having this problem. And at the end of the day, what happens is we're able as a community to actually provide opportunities for the family and to provide opportunities for that individual, where the word is antithesis, the opposite of that would be that if a person is coming out of a community that is ravished by violence, that is controlled by gangs, that is a community of fear, then they're controlled by fear as well. So yes. Comprehensive means community transformation. It means it gives us an opportunity to work, and that's why parachute programs, where people come in for 1 hour out of the day and then they leave, is not necessarily a good buy on your resources, because you want to be community driven. It's got to be place based. You got to be comprehensive. Prevention, intervention, education is really what's important. So we've seen a lot of great outcomes in this model that we've been able to create in this community.
Yeah, I'm not surprised to hear that, because very often if a youth finds himself in that kind of situation, they're going to be afraid to go to the police. In fact, they've been told if they go to the police, they're going to be killed or their family's going to be killed. So you really represent a safe place for them to come, which is, and you're well known in relationship building, and you know the community because you grew up in it. I mean, everything you've talked about is so important. I really hope that as a result of this video, that there's more efforts like yours across the country. And I know there are efforts, because I've talked to other people, but we really need to build this kind of effort that you talked about. I mean, what was your statistic? That's how I want to end. What was your statistic in the beginning? 43% reduction in violent crime as a result of what you're doing?
Yes, it was 43% reduction in murders and violent crime. And that was, we identified a local park in our area that was ravished by violence. We implemented an initiative that included these type of strategies, and it was a 43% reduction, which is unprecedented. That means that we can literally, another focus that we have as well is we want to be in high crime communities, because we know the devastation of high crime. We know the fear, the tension, the anxieties, the breakdown of the community, the lack of economic investment. When we had this whole breakdown, it's a horrific, and I would literally say it's a living hell for residents. And could you imagine to be a hardworking parent?
Yes.
Or to be a grandmother?
I can't imagine. I don't mean yes, like I can imagine. No, I can't imagine.
And this is the challenge. This is to humanize this experience, that as this breakdown occurs, right? there's a lot of blame game that occurs. With removed from the blame game, let's humanize this. Think of a grandmother that is trying to raise her grandchildren's on a fixed income as a decent, hardworking, retired individual that's a Christian that is and is struggling to do that. So this humanizing effort is that we, as a place-based intervention, literally do home visits, we do home prayers, we're able to actually undergird the efforts for that family member, the entire family. They could even have, I'll give you an example, they could have an uncle or a cousin that's on drugs. We can literally provide strategies and examples and resources for that person. And they could have someone that's struggling to get a job. We have the resources, we have a safe haven for them to come into, and we can have case managers that would help this entire family, from the child that's being recruited and exploited, all the way up to the uncle or to even a gang member that wants to leave the gang. We have those type of resources at a community level, and that's the transformation that is key to this.
That is so outstanding. I'm sure, the reduction in murders can be measured. What isn't as easily measured is the number of women you've kept from becoming victims. I'm sure it's in the hundreds or thousands. And it's just so important. It's just so important, the work that you're doing. And how I want to complete is to acknowledge you for saying yes to God.
Thank you. It's all God. Can I?
Yes.
I know we're closing. I just want to finish with this. We do
Please.
have some numbers around the efforts. In 2017, Cal State LA was part of our logic model theory of change. And in 2017, we had an 85% retention for our young girls 12 years old to 17 that were trafficked or at risk for being trafficked. Today, it's over a 90%
wow
retention rate, with well above that on job placement rates for young girls.
Wow.
Absolutely unprecedented. And
yes.
there is no magic dust to this. There is no fairy dust. What I love about our conversation, our relationship in this, is that it's very practical. And
yes.
Everything's relational.
Yes.
Everything. I am probably, and I'm sure I can speak to this, the least likely person to be involved with the rescue of children, the least likely, least qualified, the most passionate, the most driven. And I'll tell you what, and those and being in prayer and being supported by people that are like-minded is the magic ingredient, and that is Jesus Christ.
Yes. And what you've expressed, Alfred, is what it's so important, is that when we say yes to God, we just need to trust him that he will equip us. I love what you said, because that's how I felt when I started what I started, is who am I? Who am I to think that I'm going to make a difference with regard to ending human trafficking, except God made it clear. He kept calling me over and over and over again, and kept showing me my gifts, showed me where I needed to go to become equipped. And it's all turned out. It's just, we know it's God, because we're not sufficient to have made all that happen.
Absolutely.
Left to our own devices. And this is there anything else you want to say to be complete?
Well, I'd like to put that challenge, just as you did as well. I was challenged with this work. Kevin Malone is our board member, and he was doing trafficking, before people even knew about this. He was in Cambodia
right.
15, 17 years ago, fighting Southeast Asia. He approached us about 7 years ago that trafficking is a major issue in America, and that LA is a huge trafficking hub, and that there are no resources for families and children in South LA. Would you pray about fighting this issue? And I tell you, coming out of the community, I was in a place, I think, that most people would be like, well, what can I do? Or even to the point where I thought, well, I know everything about this. Just all these doubts and challenges that would oftentimes come around an individual that could be in a position, as many of the viewers are listening now. I'll tell you, I am so thankful that I took that step with my wife. I'm so thankful that we are now in a position to help. There's nothing more fulfilling than being able to stand shoulder to shoulder with the weak, the poor, the powerless, and to be able to see that we have with Christ have been able to ease some of those sufferings and points, because the Bible's about the orphans and the widows, and that's what this is about. It's orphans and widows. So I would challenge all the viewers, and I would thank them and thank you as well for this opportunity, but also for what God has birthed in your heart. And I'm excited for the future. In light of a horrific issue, I'm excited because we have Jesus. I'm excited because we have hope, and I'm excited for tomorrow.
That is a perfect place to complete. Thank you so very much for being here and sharing your heart with us. Alfred, it really has been an honor to have you. Thank you.
Absolutely. God bless.
God bless.